When someone doesn't like a character, you often hear them use the terms one or two-dimensional to describe them. By contrast, the terms three and four-dimensional are often used as a compliment, but the truth is the best stories use a mix of one, two, three, and four-dimensional characters. In this video, I'll run through my definitions of what these dimensional descriptions mean, why great stories include all four, and how you can use them in yours. I'll be using examples from the original Star Wars movie, George R.R. Martin's novel, A Game of Thrones, and in a departure from the usual sci-fi and fantasy focus of this channel, The Big Lebowski, a comedy movie. So, spoiler warning for these books and movies. One-dimensional characters are usually very minor, often only seen once or twice, fleetingly, in a story. In movies, these are extras with only a line or two, if any. Descriptions of them are often superficial, focusing on their appearance and clothing, perhaps how they speak, or their mood, chirpy or grumpy. But it won't really be in service of them as a character per se. We probably won't get a sense of their wants and needs, or their true personalities. Our 1D characters are there to service the general mood of the story, perhaps to add some thematic symbolism and to populate the world so it doesn't feel strangely empty. Here are some examples. The Stormtroopers in Star Wars. They're not very significant as characters individually, but they're important collectively. Seeing their massed ranks as they commit atrocities, their faces hidden behind identical masks, tells us a huge amount about the Empire, how it operates, and its nature as an antagonistic force. It's in stark contrast to the individualism and diversity of the rebels. In Chapter 1 of A Game of Thrones, a man is executed. We learn little about him, other than he's a wildling from north of the Wall, and that his appearance surprises Jon Snow, as it doesn't conform to the stereotypes of wildlings he's grown up with. We see nothing of the man's personality, but that's a good thing. He's a faceless victim of this grimdark setting, and his death provides an opportunity to explore the reactions of several more important characters, while Ned Stark uses the execution as an opportunity to teach his children about morality and honour. This is certainly a one-dimensional character, but a really important one for setting up the themes, plot, and development of other characters in the book and series as a whole. In The Big Lebowski, we very strangely have almost no one-dimensional characters. There seems to have been a conscious effort on the part of the Coen brothers to try and get a laugh out of even the most minor characters by characterizing them in weird and wacky ways. I feel this is actually to the detriment of the movie, as it hampers the pacing. A key example would be Knox Harrington, the video artist friend of Maud's, whose extended presence adds nothing to the plot or themes of the story. As we can see from these examples, while the term one-dimensional character often carries negative connotations, they can be incredibly important. In some situations, knowing less about a character allows us to project more of ourselves onto them, like the silent protagonist in a video game. Besides that, if we try to flesh out every single character that appears in a book or movie, it would absolutely kill the pacing of the story and create huge amounts of white noise, making it hard for the audience to identify and retain information which is important for later. As Anton Chekhov said, if in the first act of a story you have hung a pistol on the wall, then in the following one it should be fired. All the details in a story should matter. The same applies to characters. If you give the audience too much information about a minor character, they will rightly be waiting for it to pay off, and will be disappointed or confused when it doesn't. As characters move from 1 to 2 dimensions, they may have larger roles and more lines. They will begin to receive more characterization, but we won't get a real sense of who they are. We see a snapshot of their personality in a single situation or type of situation, but we won't understand how they'd behave in others. We may find out a little about their wants and motivations, but like their 1D counterparts, they're still there primarily to serve a function. Some examples are Conan Motti, the officer Darth Vader chokes in Star Wars. He's characterized as arrogant and self-serving, as he mocks Vader's faith in the Force. He gives us an insight into the politicking which takes place within the Empire, as well as a non-sympathetic character upon which Vader can demonstrate his power. The Night's Watchman we see venturing north of the Wall in the prologue to A Game of Thrones. We see something of these men's personalities, learn a little about their background, but this is primarily to build up our understanding of the setting rather than them as individuals. By the end of the prologue, we understand a surprising amount about the world of Ice and Fire, its social structures, the mystical elements which reside in it, and the threat from the others. We learn a lot from these minor characters, even if we'll not see them again. The stranger, the cowboy in the Big Lebowski. He's perhaps one of the most memorable two-dimensional characters of all time. He has an exaggerated characterization, but we only see him in a single context, appearing a few times in the movie to serve as a sort of narrator. We get no sense of his life or personality outside of that setting. The Big Lebowski is filled with larger-than-life 2D characters, with the Nihilists being another great example. The way in which they cross over from character into caricature perfectly suits the comedy tone. Like 1D characters, 2D characters are also important to have within a story. Fleshing out a character with a small part can help set the tone, like the exaggerated comedy of the Big Lebowski, and it can create opportunities to characterize your more important characters in contrast to them. Some of the most memorable characters ever created are 3 rather than 4-dimensional. They are described in detail, they have clear wants and goals which relate to and often drive the main plot, especially when they are antagonists. They have fully fleshed out personalities. We see how they act in different situations, and there is a consistency to their character traits which drive their actions and reactions. They may be a perfectionist who feels very zen at a job well done, but is frustrated and micromanaging when those around them don't meet their standards. They might be a people pleaser or a helper who is nice to everyone, but when they feel threatened, they try to create dependence in others. While 3D characters are situationally dynamic, they don't really change or grow as people over the course of the story. Some examples of 3-dimensional characters include Tywin Lannister in A Game of Thrones. He's both contemptuous of his son Tyrion, yet so prideful he's willing to wage war on the Riverlands when he's captured. He's portrayed as a cutthroat master manipulator and the biggest threat to those who would oppose the Lannisters. He can be a violent bully or quiet and cunning, but his deep need to control others and the world around him is a constant trait. Darth Vader can be violent and ruthless too, as with his interaction with Motti, but also measured and controlled, even differential, as shown through his relationship with Tarkin, and in the later films, the Emperor. This apparent dichotomy can be explained through his deep respect for hierarchy. He will do as commanded by those above him, but will tolerate no insubordination from those he perceives as lessers. We get the sense of a prideful, achiever personality type in his boasts about the power of the Force and his having become the Master in his duel with Obi-Wan. And speaking of Obi-Wan, he too is a 3-dimensional character in Star Wars. When we meet him, he's wise and powerful, and he never really changes. Even his death is met with a calm knowing. We get the sense of someone who has already been through his character arcs and is already his best self at the point at which we meet him. He's a perfect mentor, ready to take on one last Padawan and make amends for past failures. In The Big Lebowski, Walter is a great example of a 3D character. He can be hyperactive, aggressive, depressive and sad, but his core personality traits are very consistent. And though a lot happens to him in the story, he doesn't really change or grow. Strong 3-dimensional characters are really important, and as I said earlier, can be some of the most memorable. The highly developed and consistent behaviours of characters like Vader, Obi-Wan and Tywin may make them feel almost like forces of nature in the story. While they are not arcing, we get the sense they have been through significant character arcs in their past. Their still waters run deep and we want to learn more about them. They make great villains and mentors, driving forwards the plots and protagonists of their respective stories. A great way to develop 3-dimensional characters is using the Enneagram, a tool which groups together personality traits and behaviours under 9 types. Leave a comment below if you'd like me to do a video on creating characters using the Enneagram. In writing, as in physics, I'd classify the 4th dimension as time, or change. 4-dimensional characters are like their 3-dimensional cousins in that they have clear wants and plot goals. They are dynamic, with consistent traits which drive their actions. What sets them apart is that they change and develop as the story progresses, what we call a character arc. This change is associated with psychological needs which run deeper than their wants and should feel organic and believable. The character should retain their core traits, but those traits will begin to manifest differently. A perfectionist who at the start of the story is hard on those who don't meet their standards, might, in a positive change arc, learn to be more patient and become a great coach and mentor, helping others to reach their potential. A people-pleasing helper going through a negative change arc might lean in harder and harder into that instinct. We might see them become ever more insecure and ever more manipulative in their desire to feel needed. Some examples of four-dimensional characters include Luke Skywalker, who in Star Wars goes from a whiny youth who longs for adventure but lacks the assertiveness to go after it, to a leader who has found a cause he's willing to fight for. Han Solo, who goes through a similar arc to Luke, from a brave but ultimately self-serving mercenary to a hero with a cause. Ned Stark, who in A Game of Thrones undergoes what's known as a flat arc, where rather than being changed by the world, he resists temptation to hold on to the thematic truth of his moral code and effect change on those around him. Note that a flat arc is very different to not having an arc. The Dude, Big Lebowski, is probably the only 4D character in The Big Lebowski. Like Ned Stark, his arc is a flat one, although a very different one. The Dude's thematic truth is the value of taking it easy, and though he's tempted by a life more ordinary at times, he holds on to that truth to the end. Almost all protagonists in popular novels and movies are four-dimensional characters, and when this is the case, there is a special synchronicity between the key moments in their arc and the overall structure of the plot. Leave a comment below if you'd like to see a video on character arcs and their relationship to the plot in future. Characters other than protagonists may also be 4D, but their arcs won't necessarily be linked to the key beats in the same way. For example, Han Solo's arc in Star Wars is far more compressed than Luke's, even though the scale of his change and development is arguably greater. So in conclusion, 1, 2, 3 and 4-dimensional characters all have important roles to play in our stories. If you have too few 3D and 4D characters, your writing will feel stale and thin, but have too many and it will become chaotic and unfocused. The important thing is to have a mix, with each character's dimensionality and development well suited to their role in the story. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. This is still a brand new channel, but if enough people like the video, I'll keep producing coaching and theory videos like this one. If you've got any suggestions for other topics you'd like to see covered, like how to use the Enneagram or a deeper dive into character arcs, please leave a comment below. I'll do my best to react or reply to every single comment.